6 months ago, I thought I had finally found peace. After years of working 2 jobs and saving every penny, I had managed to buy a beautiful home in Willowbrook Estates, one of the most sought-after HOA communities in our city. As a single parent raising my teenage daughter Emma, I wanted nothing more than a safe neighborhood where we could finally breathe. I worked as a project manager at a construction company, and the hours were brutal. 60-hour weeks were normal, and by Friday evening, I was completely drained. But every sacrifice felt worth it when I pulled into my driveway and saw our new home waiting for us. That particular Friday had been especially exhausting. 3 client meetings, 2 contractor disputes, and a presentation that ran 2 hours late. All I wanted was to grab groceries for the week and collapse on my couch. I drove to the upscale organic market downtown, the one where I treated myself once a week to quality food for Emma and me. The shopping trip was massive. I filled 2 carts with everything we needed: fresh vegetables, organic meat, specialty items that Emma loved, cleaning supplies, and enough food to last us through my busy work week. The total came to over $300, but I had budgeted for it carefully. This was my weekly ritual, my small way of ensuring my daughter had everything she needed. Loading the groceries into my car took 15 minutes. The bags were heavy and awkward, and I knew the walk from my driveway to the front door would be a challenge. But I was used to managing everything alone. When I pulled into my driveway at Willowbrook Estates, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns. I parked and opened my trunk, staring at the mountain of grocery bags that needed to make it inside. I grabbed as many as I could carry, my arms straining under the weight, and began the careful walk to my front door. That was when she appeared. A woman in her 50s emerged from the house across the street, moving with the purposeful stride of someone on a mission. She had short gray hair, wore an expensive-looking tracksuit, and carried herself with an air of authority that immediately set me on edge. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp and demanding. "What exactly are you doing here?" I paused, confused, still balancing 6 heavy grocery bags in my arms. "I am sorry, what do you mean?" "I mean," she said, stepping closer and crossing her arms, "I have never seen you before and I know everyone in this neighborhood. Are you supposed to be here?" The question hit me like a slap. I had been living here for 6 months, and while I kept to myself due to my work schedule, I was a legitimate resident. I owned this house. I belonged here. "I live here," I said calmly, nodding toward my front door. "This is my home." Her eyes narrowed as she looked me up and down, taking in my work clothes and the grocery bags. "Really? Because I am the unofficial security patrol for this community, and I keep track of everyone who comes and goes. I have never seen you before today." "I work long hours," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am usually not home during the day." "Show me some identification," she demanded, stepping even closer. "Prove you live here." My blood pressure spiked, but I managed to stay calm. I carefully set down the grocery bags and pulled out my driver's license, showing her my address. "Here, this is my house." She studied the ID with the intensity of a detective, clearly hopping to find some discrepancy. When she found none, her expression shifted to barely concealed disappointment. "Well," she said, reluctantly handing back my license, "I suppose that checks out, but I will be keeping an eye on things around here. We have had some suspicious activity lately, and I take the security of this community very seriously." She turned and walked back toward her house, but not before giving me one final, lingering look that made my skin crawl. As I picked up my grocery bags and finally made it to my front door, I could not shake the feeling that this encounter was far from over. Something about the way she had looked at me, studied me, felt predatory and wrong. I had no idea that I had just met the woman who would try to destroy my life. The harassment started slowly, so subtly that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. But within a week of our first encounter, I began noticing the woman everywhere. She would be standing at her front window when I left for work in the morning, writing in a small notebook. When I returned in the evening, there she was again, this time with a camera phone, taking pictures of my car, my license plate, my front door. I learned her name was Carol Henderson when I overheard her introducing herself to my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, while asking intrusive questions about my schedule. "Do you know what time she usually comes and goes?" Carol asked Mrs. Patterson over the fence. "I am just trying to keep track of the neighborhood patterns for security purposes." Mrs. Patterson, a sweet elderly woman, seemed confused but answered politely. "She works very hard, that young lady. Leaves early, comes home late most days. Always seems exhausted, poor thing." "What about weekends?" Carol pressed. "Does she have visitors, any unusual activity?" I watched this exchange from my kitchen window, my stomach churning with disbelief. This woman was conducting surveillance on me, gathering intelligence like I was some kind of criminal suspect. The invasion of privacy escalated quickly. I discovered that Carol had been going through my mailbox, leaving fingerprints on my mail and moving letters around. When I installed a security camera to monitor my front porch, the footage revealed something even more disturbing. Carol had been going through my trash cans on collection days, pulling out receipts, food packaging, and personal documents. She would photograph everything before putting it back, creating some kind of detailed inventory of my life. The grocery store surveillance was the most unsettling discovery. I began noticing a familiar car following me during my weekly shopping trips. Carol would park several spaces away and watch me shop, timing how long I spent in each aisle, photographing my cart, even following me to the checkout line to observe my purchases. One Saturday morning, as I loaded groceries into my car at the organic market, Carol finally made her move. She approached me directly in the parking lot, her face twisted with barely contained anger. "I need to ask you something," she said, positioning herself between me and my car door. "What do you want, Carol?" I asked, surprised by my own boldness in using her name. Her eyes widened slightly. "How do you know my name?" "You have been asking my neighbors about me for weeks. Word gets around." She recovered quickly, crossing her arms and glaring at me. "Good. Then you know I take community security seriously. What I want to know is how a woman your age, living alone, can afford to shop like this every week." I stared at her in disbelief. "Excuse me." "These groceries," she said, gesturing at my cart. "This is easily $300 worth of organic food. High-end items. Expensive cuts of meat. Either you are making a lot more money than someone in your position should be making, or you are getting this money through other means." The accusation hung in the air like poison. I felt my face flush with anger and embarrassment. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked. "I am suggesting," Carol said, stepping closer, "that people do not just move into neighborhoods like this and start spending money like water unless something suspicious is going on. Maybe you are dealing drugs. Maybe you are stealing. Maybe you are running some kind of illegal business out of that house." The audacity of her accusations left me speechless. Here was a woman who knew nothing about my life, my work, my struggles, accusing me of criminal activity because I could afford to buy groceries. "You are way out of line," I said, my voice shaking with controlled anger. What I do for work, how I spend my money, and what I buy at the grocery store is absolutely none of your business. Everything in my neighborhood is my business, Carol shot back. I have been living in Willowbrook Estates for 15 years. I know what belongs and what does not. And you, with your expensive shopping habits and your secretive behavior, do not belong. She turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the parking lot with my hands shaking and my heart racing. The mask had finally come off. This was not about neighborhood security or community concern. This was about something much darker, more personal, and more dangerous than I had ever imagined. As I drove home that day, Carol's car following me at a distance, I realized that I was no longer dealing with a nosy neighbor. I was dealing with someone who had declared war on my very existence in this community. The question was, why? The answer came in the form of official HOA correspondence that started arriving in my mailbox 3 weeks after the parking lot confrontation. The first letter was politely worded, but ominous in its implications. "Dear resident," it began, "we have received complaints regarding suspicious activity at your residence. Please contact the HOA office within 10 business days to discuss these concerns and provide documentation of your compliance with community standards." I called the HOA office immediately, demanding to know what complaints had been filed and by whom. The administrative assistant, clearly uncomfortable, explained that someone had reported unusual traffic patterns and potential commercial activity at my address. "What kind of commercial activity?" I asked, my voice tight with frustration. "The complaint suggests you may be operating a business from your home without proper permits," she replied. "There are also concerns about noise violations and improper use of common areas." Every word was a lie. I worked from home occasionally, like thousands of other people, but I was not running a business. I was one of the quietest residents in the community, and I had never even used the common areas. The second letter arrived a week later, more aggressive in tone. This time, the HOA demanded proof of my employment, financial records, and a written explanation for my irregular schedule and suspicious purchasing patterns. That phrase stopped me cold. Suspicious purchasing patterns. Only one person had been tracking my shopping habits with that level of detail. I decided it was time to fight back with facts. I installed additional security cameras around my property and began documenting every interaction with Carol. I also reached out to my neighbors, asking if they had experienced similar harassment. What I discovered was both shocking and illuminating. Mrs. Patterson revealed that Carol had approached her multiple times, asking detailed questions about my work schedule, visitors, and daily routines. "She seemed very interested in whether you were home during the day," Mrs. Patterson said. "She kept asking if you had men visiting, if you received a lot of packages, things like that." Mr. Rodriguez from 2 houses down had an even more disturbing story. That woman came to my door claiming she was conducting a security survey for the HOA. She wanted to know if I had ever seen you bringing unusual items into your house, if your garage door was open at odd hours, if you had expensive cars visiting. The picture that emerged was of a systematic campaign designed to build a case against me. Carol was not just being nosy. She was gathering evidence for something bigger. The truth hit me like a lightning bolt when I was reviewing my security footage from the past month. In one clip, I caught Carol talking to a younger man outside my house, pointing at my windows and front door. The man was taking notes and appeared to be measuring distances with his eyes. I enhanced the footage and managed to capture a clear image of both of them. A reverse image search revealed nothing, but when I showed the photo to Mrs. Patterson, she gasped. "Oh my goodness," she said. "That is Carol's son, Michael. I met him at the community barbecue last year. He was asking everyone about home prices in the neighborhood." The pieces suddenly clicked together with terrifying clarity. I remembered something Carol had said during our parking lot confrontation. People do not just move into neighborhoods like this. She had not been questioning my right to live here because she was suspicious of my activities. She had been questioning my right to live here because she wanted me gone. I did more research, reaching out to a realtor friend who had access to property records and loan applications. What she found confirmed my worst fears. Michael Henderson had been pre-approved for a mortgage 6 months ago, right around the time I had moved into the neighborhood. The loan amount matched exactly what my house would sell for in a distressed sale situation. He had been waiting for a property to become available at below market value. Carol had not been trying to prove I was a criminal. She had been trying to force me to sell my house so her son could buy it at a discount. The grocery obsession made perfect sense now. She had not been judging my spending habits out of moral outrage. She had been cataloging my possessions, making a mental inventory of what would come with the house when her son moved in. Every complaint to the HOA, every photograph, every conversation with neighbors had been part of a calculated plan to make my life so miserable that I would give up and move away. But Carol had made one critical mistake in her scheming. She had underestimated exactly how far she was willing to go to get what she wanted. And she had severely underestimated my determination to fight back. 3 months into Carol's harassment campaign, she must have realized that her HOA complaints and neighborhood gossip were not working fast enough. I was still living in my house, still shopping at the organic market, still refusing to be driven away by her psychological warfare. It was time for her to escalate. The day it all exploded was a Saturday in late October. I had just finished a particularly grueling week at work, managing 3 construction projects simultaneously, and I was looking forward to my weekly grocery run and a quiet weekend at home with Emma. I decided to treat us both and went all out at the organic market. Fresh salmon, organic vegetables, specialty cheeses, artisanal bread, high-quality olive oil, and Emma's favorite imported chocolates. The total came to over $400, but it was worth it to have a relaxing weekend with my daughter. The drive home was peaceful. I was actually looking forward to cooking dinner and watching movies with Emma. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Carol's car parked across the street, but I had grown used to her surveillance by now. I opened my trunk and began loading my arms with grocery bags. The haul was massive, requiring 2 trips, but I was determined to get everything inside in one go. I grabbed 8 bags, my arms straining under the weight, and began walking toward my front door. That was when Carol struck. She came barreling across the street like a woman possessed, her face flushed with anger and determination. "Stop right there," she shouted, positioning herself directly in front of my door. "I demand to know where you got those groceries." I stopped, my arms aching from the weight of the bags. "Carol, please move. These bags are heavy and I need to get inside." "Not until you show me receipts for every single item in those bags," she said, crossing her arms. "I have been watching you, and there is no way you can afford this kind of shopping on a legitimate salary." "Get out of my way," I said, my patience finally snapping. "You have no right to demand anything from me." "I have every right," Carol screamed, her voice echoing across the quiet neighborhood. I am the security patrol for this community, and I suspect you of theft." Theft? I could not believe what I was hearing. "You think I stole groceries?" "I think you are either stealing them or buying them with drug money," she said, stepping closer. "No single mother shops like this without dirty money." That was when she made her biggest mistake. Carol reached out and tried to grab one of the grocery bags from my arms. "Give me those bags," she demanded, tugging at the handles. "I want to see what you have in there." I pulled back, but Carol was stronger than she looked. The bag tore open, sending organic apples rolling across my driveway. "Stop!" I shouted, but Carol was beyond reason now. She grabbed for another bag, this one containing eggs and bread. "If you have nothing to hide," she panted, struggling to wrestle the groceries away from me, "then you will let me inspect everything." I held tight to the remaining bags, backing toward my front door. "You are insane. Get away from me." That was when Carol played her nuclear card. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, speaking in a loud, theatrical voice, clearly designed to be heard by any neighbors who might be watching. "Yes, 911. I need police immediately. I am witnessing a robbery in progress at 247 Maple Street in Willowbrook Estates. There is a suspicious person who has stolen groceries and is now trespassing on private property." My world tilted on its axis. I stared at Carol in complete shock as she continued her performance. "Yes, she appears to be African American, approximately 30 years old, carrying multiple bags of expensive groceries that she clearly could not afford legitimately. She became aggressive when I questioned her, and is now attempting to break into someone's house." Every word was a lie. I was standing in my own driveway, holding groceries I had legally purchased, being accused of crimes I had never committed. "Please hurry," Carol continued, her voice dripping with fake urgency. "I am afraid for my safety. This person seems dangerous and unstable." She ended the call and smiled at me with triumphant satisfaction. "Now we will see who belongs in this neighborhood and who does not," she said. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my house keys, the grocery bag still clutched against my chest. Carol had just weaponized law enforcement against me for the crime of bringing home groceries. She had called the police and told them I was a thief, a trespasser, and a threat. As the sirens grew louder, I realized that this moment would define everything that came next. Carol had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She had just declared total war. Two police cruisers pulled into my driveway with lights flashing but no sirens. The officers who emerged looked tired and skeptical, as if they had responded to one too many neighborhood disputes that day. Carol immediately rushed toward them, pointing dramatically at me and my scattered groceries. "Officers, thank goodness you are here," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured fear. "This woman has been casing the neighborhood for weeks, and today I caught her red-handed with stolen merchandise." The lead officer, a middle-aged man with graying temples, looked from Carol to me to the organic apples still rolling around my driveway. His expression suggested he was already questioning the urgency of this particular robbery in progress. "Ma'am," he said to me, "can you tell me what is going on here?" "Officer," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "I live here. This is my house. I just got home from grocery shopping and this woman attacked me in my own driveway." Carol scoffed loudly. "That is exactly what a thief would say. Officer, I have been monitoring suspicious activity at this address for months. This woman claims to live here, but I have never seen any proof of legitimate residency." The second officer, a younger woman, was already examining the scene with a more critical eye. She had noticed that I was standing directly in front of a house that clearly matched the address on my driver's license, which I was already pulling from my wallet. "Here is my identification," I said, handing over my license. "This is my address. I have lived here for 6 months." The lead officer examined my ID carefully, comparing it to the house numbers. "This appears to be in order. Ma'am," he said, turning to Carol, "what exactly did you see this woman steal?" Carol's confident facade began to crack slightly. "Well, I did not actually see her steal anything, but look at those groceries. That is hundreds of dollars worth of organic food. There is no way she can afford that legitimately." "So you called 911 to report a robbery because you think someone's groceries are too expensive?" the female officer asked, her tone growing colder. "I called because she is suspicious," Carol said, her voice rising defensively. "I am the unofficial security patrol for this community, and I have been tracking her activities for months." "Tracking her activities," the lead officer repeated. "What kind of tracking?" I pulled out my phone and showed them the security footage I had been collecting. "Officer, this woman has been stalking me for months. She goes through my mail, follows me to the grocery store, takes pictures of my house, and interrogates my neighbors about my personal life." The female officer watched the footage with growing concern. "Ma'am," she said to Carol, "this appears to show you going through this woman's mailbox. That is a federal crime." Carol's face went pale. "I was just checking for suspicious packages. Community security is everyone's responsibility." "Do you have any official authority to conduct security patrols?" the lead officer asked. "Well, no, but I have been living here for 15 years, and I know what belongs and what does not." I pulled out my receipts from the grocery store, still crisp and clear. "Officers, here are the receipts for everything I purchased today. Every item is accounted for. I shop at this store every weekend and they know me by name." The lead officer examined the receipts carefully. The timestamps showed I had made the purchases less than an hour ago, and every item scattered across my driveway was listed in detail. "Ma'am," the female officer said to Carol, "can you explain why you believed this woman had stolen these groceries when she has clear proof of purchase?" Carol stammered, her elaborate story falling apart under scrutiny. "I just know that people like her do not usually shop at places like that." The silence that followed her words was deafening. Both officers stared at Carol with expressions of disgust and disbelief. "People like her," the female officer repeated. The lead officer was already reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, can you run a background check on?" He looked at Carol expectantly. "Carol Henderson," she whispered, suddenly looking much smaller than she had moments before. While they waited for the background check, the female officer took me aside. "I want you to know that we take false reporting very seriously," she said quietly. "Filing a false police report is a misdemeanor, and based on what we have seen here today, this woman appears to have committed several crimes against you." The radio crackled to life. "Unit 47, we show multiple complaints filed by Carol Henderson over the past 2 years. Harassment, false reporting, disturbing the peace. She has been warned twice about misusing emergency services." Carol's face crumbled as she realized her plan had backfired completely. "Carol Henderson," the lead officer said, "you are under arrest for filing a false police report." The weeks following Carol's arrest brought a cascade of consequences that even I had not anticipated. What started as a false police report quickly unraveled into something much larger and more damaging to Carol's life. The HOA launched an immediate investigation into Carol's unauthorized security patrol activities. They discovered that she had been filing false complaints not just against me, but against 3 other families over the past 2 years. Each case followed the same pattern. Carol would target newer residents, conduct surveillance, file baseless complaints, and try to make their lives miserable enough to force them to sell. The Rodriguez family had endured 8 months of harassment before finally giving up and moving away. The young couple on Oak Street had received dozens of HOA violation notices for imaginary infractions until they sold their house at a loss. The elderly Patels had been accused of running an illegal restaurant because they occasionally cooked traditional Indian food. Carol had not just been targeting me. She had been systematically terrorizing anyone she deemed unworthy of living in her neighborhood. The criminal charges against Carol multiplied quickly. In addition to filing a false police report, she was charged with harassment, mail tampering, and stalking. The security footage I had collected became crucial evidence, showing months of illegal surveillance and property violations. But the most devastating blow to Carol's scheme came from an unexpected source: the banking industry. When news of Carol's arrest became public record, it triggered an automatic review of her son Michael's mortgage pre-approval. Banks take any criminal activity in a family very seriously, especially when it involves harassment and false reporting. Michael's loan was immediately revoked. I learned this detail from Mrs. Patterson, who had overheard Carol screaming at someone on the phone in her backyard. She was absolutely hysterical, Mrs. Patterson told me over coffee, screaming about how the bank was ruining her son's future, how this was all a misunderstanding. She kept saying that house was supposed to be his. The irony was perfect. In her desperation to force me out so her son could buy my house cheaply, Carol had destroyed his ability to buy any house at all. The HOA's investigation revealed even more disturbing details. Carol had been keeping detailed files on multiple residents, including photographs, schedules, and personal information gathered through illegal surveillance. She had been operating like a private investigator with no training, no authority, and no legal right to do any of it. The new HOA board, embarrassed by the scandal, implemented strict policies prohibiting residents from conducting unauthorized security activities. They also established a formal complaint process that required evidence and prohibited anonymous accusations. My property value, ironically, increased during this period. The publicity around Carol's arrest and the community's response had actually made Willowbrook estates more desirable. Potential buyers were impressed by how quickly the community had dealt with the harassment problem and established better oversight. 3 months after her arrest, Carol's house went up for sale. She could not face the neighbors who now knew the truth about her activities. The for sale sign appeared overnight, and within days, moving trucks were loading up her belongings. I watched from my kitchen window as Carol supervised the movers, her face haggard and defeated. She looked toward my house several times, but I felt no satisfaction in her downfall. I felt relief. The house sold quickly, well below market value. The new owners were a lovely young family with twin toddlers who immediately brought energy and joy to the neighborhood. Carol's civil troubles were just beginning. The families she had harassed were filing lawsuits for emotional distress, property damage, and violation of privacy rights. Her legal bills were mounting, and her reputation in the community was destroyed beyond repair. But the sweetest justice was yet to come. The house that Carol had coveted for her son, the one she had tried to steal through harassment and false accusations, was about to become available again. And this time, I would make sure it went to someone who truly deserved it. 6 months after Carol's arrest, I was sitting on my front porch enjoying a Saturday morning coffee when I noticed something that made me smile. The "For Sale" sign had appeared overnight in front of Carol's old house, but this time, it was not because of scandal or shame. The young family who had bought Carol's house was relocating for work, and they needed to sell quickly. It was a beautiful home in perfect condition, and I knew it would attract plenty of interest. That afternoon, as I was watering my garden, I noticed a familiar car pull up to the curb. A young couple stepped out, holding hands and looking nervous but excited. They were clearly first-time homebuyers, probably in their late 20s, and they reminded me of myself 6 months ago, hopeful, determined, and looking for a place to call home. I watched them walk around the property, pointing at the mature oak trees and discussing the layout with their realtor. The woman was visibly pregnant, and they kept talking about nurseries and playgrounds and safe neighborhoods for children. Something about their genuine excitement and obvious love for each other moved me deeply. They represented everything that Carol had tried to destroy: the simple dream of finding a good home and building a life together. That evening, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. I walked across the street and knocked on their car window as they finished their second viewing of the house. "Excuse me," I said. "I am your potential neighbor. Could I talk to you for a moment?" They introduced themselves as David and Sarah Martinez, both teachers who had been saving for years to buy their first home. Sarah was 7 months pregnant with their first child, and they were hopping to move in before the baby arrived. "We love the neighborhood," Sarah said, her eyes bright with excitement. "It seems so peaceful and family-friendly." I almost laughed at the irony, but instead, I told them the truth about what this community had been through and how it had emerged stronger and more welcoming than before. "There was some trouble with a previous resident," I explained carefully, "but the community came together to address it. The HOA has new leadership, better policies, and everyone is committed to making this a place where families can thrive." Over the next few weeks, I became an unofficial advocate for David and Sarah. I connected them with a mortgage broker who specialized in helping teachers qualify for first-time buyer programs. I introduced them to the contractors who had worked on my house when I first moved in. I even helped them negotiate with the sellers to include some furniture and appliances in the sale. The day they closed on the house, Sarah knocked on my door with tears in her eyes. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. "You barely know us, but you have helped us achieve our dream." "Someone should have done the same for me when I moved here," I replied. "Now I am just paying it forward." The transformation of our neighborhood over the past year has been remarkable. What was once a place where Carol terrorized residents with suspicion and harassment has become a true community. We have monthly barbecues, a neighborhood watch program with actual training and oversight, and a welcoming committee for new residents. Emma loves living here now. She has friends throughout the neighborhood, and the other parents look out for all the children as if they were their own family. I have become something I never expected: a community leader. Other residents come to me when they face problems or need advice. The HOA board asked me to serve as a member, and I accepted, determined to ensure that no one else ever faces the kind of harassment that Carol inflicted on so many families. Last month, Sarah gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. As I held little Isabella in the hospital, I thought about the chain of events that had brought us all together. Carol's hatred and greed had been intended to destroy lives and break up families. Instead, her actions had created something beautiful, a community that protects its own and welcomes newcomers with open arms. The house that Carol tried to steal for her son is now home to a family that will raise their children with love, kindness, and respect for their neighbors. David has already started a garden in the backyard where Carol once conducted her surveillance, and Sarah waves to me every morning as she walks Isabella around the block. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. Sometimes it is simply living well, building community, and ensuring that love triumphs over hatred. Carol wanted to destroy my life to benefit her family. Instead, she created a neighborhood where families like David and Sarah's can flourish. That is justice served at its sweetest.